Cari amici sportivi, Stevie P is back on the local soccer show, guys. Nice to be back. Thank you to our friends from The Ball is Round for filling in for me as I had a work Halloween party for the last local soccer show. Not going to tell you my costume, that's private information. But let's get down to it, guys. We have a great guest tonight who's going to share some knowledge and wisdom on a topic that I think we don't touch on enough, something that I for sure have taken for granted, along with many others. Um, but before that, guys, special thank you again to Evangelista Sport for being the sponsor of the local soccer show. Greatly appreciated. It's World Cup time, guys. So evangelistasport.com. If you're not in the Montreal region, check out their website. They have everything ready for you. Team Canada, look at this beautiful shirt. You can see my pectorals. We're all ready. They dressed me up nice for tonight. Thank you to Carmelo, Nico, and Mr. Sanzaloni and the team at Evangelista Sport. If you're in beautiful Montreal in La Belle Province, check them out. 6821 Boulevard Saint Laurent. Have a good day there. Spend some time there. Spend some money there, guys. That's what they're gonna want you to do. There's tons of soccer apparel. There's great stuff for your club in terms of training material. Guys, goaler equipment, cleats, indoor, outdoor shoes, you name it, they have it. Evangelista Sport, check them out. They do ship pretty much everywhere, and we'll get you your soccer apparel. So on tonight's show, Presidente got us a fantastic guest, Richard Bucciarelli. He is the president of Speed Training and Soccer Fitness. So, Presidente, let's roll the intro and let's get Richard in here. Richard, welcome and thank you for coming on the local soccer show.
You're welcome. Bonjour, bonsoir.
Whoa,
I'm trying my best. Sorry, I didn't pay enough attention in French class in high school, but
that's
I
no
love.
worries, no
Yeah,
worries, Richard. It's nice to have you on. Guys, what are the chances that we're talking to Richard, who is a fitness specialist? He will tell you about his story. He has many, many other titles when he introduces himself, but it sounds like he's actually in a gym, guys. So, uh,
I believe it or not, I am. So I'm here inside my business, the Speed Training Lab and High Performance Center, and we have a physiotherapy clinic. And these two facilities are inside a sports facility where we have, basketball, volleyball, soccer. So you'll hear some of the noise. Maybe if it gets bad, I'll mute. But
it's
yeah,
beautiful. It's beautiful background music to everybody's
right,
ears to
yeah.
have you on. Again, Richard, I really want to thank you for taking the time to be on the local soccer show.
You're
If
welcome.
you've watched it before, you did your checks. You know what me and Presidente try to do with the local soccer show. Bring out some information to new topics of conversation. But before we start, all the guests who are going to watch it tonight live or watch it while they're doing their treadmill or their training, because
Right.
once they hear you, they're going to go back to training.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into soccer, and your journey from a kid to where you are now?
Right. So, I mean, I was a player. I'm from Toronto, so I played in a couple of different clubs in Toronto, and eventually I played in university at York University. And for a few years in a league called the CPSL, the Canadian Professional Soccer League. Maybe you guys remember that league. So I was a decent player, but not great, not good enough to make any money. At the time that I was playing, again in university and in the CPSL, I was also I was coaching youth soccer with a local club, and I was also studying sports science in university. I was studying kinesiology, and so some of the parents of the kids I was coaching, at the time, they knew that I was into fitness, and I was doing some personal training on the side, and so they knew that. So they said, "Hey, my son, he's a little slow, whatever. Can you train him and stay after practice?" And they offered to give me $30, and I was like, "Great, yeah, I'll do that." I didn't even know that was something I could do, so I did it. And then eventually, some coaches from the same club, but like, they were training beside us on the field, and they saw what I was doing, and they said, well, maybe can you train my team, and you can stay after practice for another hour and we'll give you $50. And I was blown away, honestly. I mean, this is like 25 years ago. So basically, by the time I graduated, I had this like little part-time business going, training soccer players. And at the time, there was no such thing as an actual business doing that. There were some that were training hockey players. So maybe you guys have heard this term dry land, like that was, I was aware, and some of us that were studying kinesiology and whatever, we were aware of these companies that did dry land training for hockey. And I thought about it, and I said, well, there's thousands of soccer players around here, and there's no, they need fitness and nobody's training them. So maybe instead of, like, when you graduate with a kinesiology degree, you can go to, if you have the grades, you can go to medical school, you can become a physiotherapist, you can, there's many directions you can go. And I said, well, maybe I'll use my knowledge and my, my experience here, and I'll do this full time. So that's what I did.
Amazing.
And, I had this little business called Soccer Fitness, and, it was definitely a long journey to get where I am now. I guess if I'm making a long story short, once I decided to do that for my career, which is to train soccer players, I kind of had, in my head this idea that I said, well, I want to try to be the best, that I can be in this career. And so I came up with these different categories of, expertise. And in each one of them, I wanted to try to excel. So I said, well, I'm going to have to become an expert coach, and I'm going to have to do my licenses and all that. So I did. I got all the way to my A license. And, I said, well, I'm probably going to have a facility, because it's not enough just to go running around from field to field. And, so eventually I had saved money and opened a facility. And in the facility, I kind of figured as well that, I had my degree, but that doesn't, that's a bachelor's degree. It doesn't really make you an expert. So I'm going to have to, continue my education, eventually get a master's and a PhD. And I'm very close to finishing that PhD now. Should have been already, because of COVID, I didn't. But I wanted to conduct research on soccer, and specifically to conduct research using the, the training that I'm doing to try to help, validate it and examine it and all that. And so that's what I did with my research, with my graduate work. And we can talk later, but I've got some really unique equipment in my facility. I have the fastest treadmills in the world.
Amazing.
Treadmills that go at very high incline. Like we have some really unique stuff that, so my graduate work, my PhD is in biomechanics and physiology. And so, I've been able to test out and modify the training that we do and try to perfect it through the research. And the other thing that I figured I was going to need, and again, I came up with this all when I was about 23 years old, right? 23, 24. I figured I needed to work at the high level in my sport, because that's the way you get credibility. And so I started just volunteering with York University, because that's the school I had played at. And, we'd already become a little successful while I was there, but afterwards became very successful.
Yes.
Maybe, right? And so I was part of some of those teams as a coach. And eventually, I opened my facility. I got hooked up with the national team, women's team. I worked with Toronto FC. I spent some time working with professional clubs overseas. I mean, I can get into it, but I was always very driven to get to the highest level in soccer, to the pro or the national level as a coach and as a fitness coach, because I knew that was going to kind of elevate me in my career. And anyway, so that's the short version of a long story.
Amazing. That's a great story, Richard. Amazing stuff, and good for you. And that PhD and whatever HDs you need after that,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you'll be more than qualified to get it. Richard, one of the questions that probably some people might ask themselves too, like kinesiology, what is it exactly? Can you explain a short description of exactly what that is? Is it a word that before meeting you, I had no idea what it meant?
Interesting. Yeah. So it's literally the study of movement. So kinos is, the Greek movement, and ology is the study. So it's exercise science with a focus on movement. So you study biology, you study physics, but it's biomechanics, so kind of the physics of movement. You study exercise physiology, and so that's where biology kind of leads into the physiology of exercise. So we learn about the heart, about the muscles, about how we generate energy, all those kind of things. And then again, because it's exercise science, there's a lot of a focus on things like periodization of training, which I know we'll talk about later, and how to plan training. fitness assessment, how to test athletes, but also how to test, people from the general population. There's health, there's nutrition, disease prevention. There's kind of it's a broad category, but really it's like physical education, but with a focus a lot on the science. So
Amazing. Yeah, super interesting. We touched on it, and one of the big hot topic items that we always talk about on the show is Canada's club licensing program and what they've done there. I would love to, someone like yourself, who I'm not saying is not directly involved, but like you said, you took all your licenses, you understand what it is to become a coach in this program here. What are your thoughts on Canada's club licensing program?
I should mention I was involved. So for many years, I taught the fitness component of the Canadian national licenses. I also have a course that I teach called the Soccer Fitness Trainers course. Used to be was picked up for many years. I taught it through Ontario Soccer, not anymore. But the coaches from Ontario and Canada Soccer that developed the club licensing system, basically I was the one that helped them to develop the standards for the physical part. So I know very well. So I think it's great that the Canada Soccer and the provincial associations have been working for many years to try to set standards. And of course, the standards go way beyond just the physical, training and testing and all that. Like they have standards for licensing and safe sport and all of it, right? Like the administration, it's good. The one thing I would say, and not to be too controversial about it, but setting standards.
Oh no, be controversial.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, yeah.
We like that.
Yeah. So what I'll say is setting standards is one thing, but making sure that those standards are actually being met is another. And so again, I can give lots of examples of things that I had recommended. For example, I recommended that fitness assessments should be mandatory for all high performance leagues, but that those assessments should be, and this is standard practice for sports science, the tests need to be reliable and valid. And for the tests to be reliable and valid, they have to be conducted in a standardized location, preferably in the same location, but if not, at least it has to be, for example, indoor. It has to be on turf, and always on turf. You have to use the same equipment, right? You have to ideally, again, maybe even the same people doing the test. And that data, when we're collecting test data on players, then we need professionals, can be me, can be other people, but people that know what they're doing to look at the data, to track the players, to monitor progress, to identify players that are showing very well, that maybe can be candidates to go to the next level. And honestly, Stevie, none of that was done. Literally none. So the tests were not consistent at all. Some were outside, some were inside. Some used electronic systems to measure speed and power. Others used stopwatches. I mean, it's just not been implemented at all. And on top of it,
it was not standardized and
not at all,
even playing field.
And there's never been anyone at Canada Soccer or Ontario Soccer that has ever been put in charge of actually looking at the data. I'm not so sure in 10 years in these high performance leagues that we've had anyone looking at youth players' test data. And remember that the high performance leagues are the leagues that feed the provincial teams, which feed the national teams. So these are all the best young players. Nobody's looking at their fitness test data. So that's a huge problem, which needs to be addressed.
You know what? And I agree. I've always said it here. We have to look at it objectively. Like it's very good that we're getting some information about licensing and a standardization top down, but we need to look bottom up as well. Like the programs at the national level or the provincial level need to know that if you do it at, let's say, a grassroots level, you've already have something to compare it to once they reach to that next level. And like you said, it's disappointing to hear that it's not part of it, but I don't know why, and again, I'll say it for you.
Yeah.
I'm always around local soccer, and they always use the excuse of budget, but that can't be all the excuse all the time, right? Again, I don't want to put you in a bad spot, but it really bothers me when we tend as humans to use money as a way to discourage people from doing something when that's not true, right?
Yeah. Yeah, what I would say is obviously whether it's a club, academy, or provincial association, whatever, if they want to bring in fitness professionals, people want to be paid, and of course we do, but the truth is, you're right, it's not prohibitive. The cost that would be involved. I did it for many years with many clubs here in Ontario. So again, I won't name names, of course, but like we had programs in place where the fee per player, like per player per year, was about between $200 to $300, and that program with that fee provided 3 fitness tests standardized, 1 day a week of dedicated fitness training, and coach education. And that's kind of the next piece that I really would like to talk about, because that's another thing that if we're talking about how to deliver better fitness to players, they need to be tested, standardized. Ideally, it's good to get professional fitness people involved, but there's always constraints. There's no club or academy, even Toronto FC. I mean, I don't know a lot about what's happening in the Montreal Impact Academy. I know before, I don't know now, but even in those professional academies, when I worked at TFC, I was one fitness coach with the whole academy, and I was part-time. So even in those levels, they don't have one fitness coach with every team every day. So it's never going to happen at the amateur level.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Well, that means the clubs have players, they need physical training. They cannot logistically, never mind even money-wise, but they cannot logistically bring in a fitness professional for every practice every day.
No.
The coaches have to know about fitness training. They have to be educated. And in Canada, we have done, I don't even want to say a poor job. We haven't educated coaches at all about physical fitness. So the coaches in Canada can get all the way to their A license. I know, because I've done it. Okay. And they tell you absolutely nothing. They tell you nothing about fitness testing. They tell you nothing about periodization. They tell you nothing about injury prevention. They tell you nothing about how to plan training. So they're left on their own with no knowledge. And, the results are that we are not training our athletes properly at all. So.
No, again, very eye-opening to see that. I follow a lot of obviously you see in the back of Milan, and
Me too,
we
by
have
the
our
way. I didn't tell you that, but yeah, I've been a Milan fan
Richard.
since
We
I was a
knew
little
that's why
kid.
you're
Yeah.
on the show, and that's why all the easy questions are coming your
That's
way.
right. Yeah.
But Milan has always had a terrible. Not always. We've had once the mythical Milan lab was there, and we seemed like we were impenetrable. We were creating players that never got injured.
Right.
Now at Milan, we always see the constant muscle fatigue injuries, pulls, very not breaks, but it's a lot of soft tissue injuries, muscle pulls. We always hear the famous polpaccio, which I'll translate to calf for everybody.
Yeah.
What do you think? At those clubs, they have a fitness coach. They talk about it all the time. Why? Especially in a continent like North America, U.S. and Canada,
Yeah.
where we kind of took the avenue of creating an athlete in first and a soccer player second.
Yeah.
Why would we not focus on that at the grassroots level or in these training sessions?
So I want to be clear that we can just differentiate that, like, so the Canada, and I know this because I worked for a year in Uruguay, and through my academic work, and my work with the national team, I've traveled all over the world. So I know that Canada in soccer has a reputation of having these great athletes, right? And we have good athletes, but the reason we have such good athletes is because we have a very diverse population, and we have lots of people coming from all over the world, including a lot who are genetically really great athletes. Like that's an advantage we have. Look at our national team now. I mean, we've got lots of players that are fast and have excellent endurance, and that's great. But the truth is that we've got good athletes. The fact that we have good athletes does not mean that we are the ones that are training and making those athletes. We have to be clear about that.
Yeah.
And when I go back to what I'm talking about here with let's say with regards to the training that the athletes receive, and maybe I know you're asking about injuries and how do we connect the two. Okay, so the and this is something I've written about. I've had articles, both an academic paper as well as articles on blogs and things, which I call the overtraining myth.
Yeah.
So I'll explain what I mean by this. So the message that we're getting from Canada Soccer, Ontario Soccer, and from more or less the long-term athlete development model is that the reason that young athletes, soccer and other athletes, right, the reason they're getting hurt is because they're doing too much. They're overtraining. That's what we're being told. Okay, so I can speak for soccer because I've tested thousands of soccer players, and the bulk of that has been at the youth amateur level. So I know very well, right, the fitness level of youth amateur soccer players in Canada is very, very low. Nobody is in shape. And part of that, as I said, is because I think we don't educate coaches. Coaches don't have the knowledge to do physical training. And most of the time, the practices are not intense enough and the players are not fit, right? So since we know that they're not in shape, it cannot be that the players are getting hurt because they are overtraining. Because overtraining only occurs when you're actually training a lot. We're talking 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and your fitness level would be very high if you were overtraining. Yeah. So the athletes, the message we're getting is wrong. That's why I call it a myth. It's a myth that they're getting hurt because of overtraining. In fact, what's happening is they're undertraining. They're not training hard enough. And because of that, then they go into games unprepared. And that lack of preparedness, that's what causes them to get hurt. So it's not too much. It's too much too soon. And that's because coaches don't understand periodization of training. And if they did, then we'd be able to build up the athlete's fitness a lot more, and the number of injuries would go down. So that's the point that I've made. So does that make sense? Or
yeah, it's crazy. It's just I keep on thinking of all the injuries that I see, across the board.
Right.
And I was one, and again, maybe I'm completely wrong. I thought they just were playing too much soccer. It's not like
yeah. So I don't want to be misunderstood. It's possible that there's maybe too many games. But really, if we look at the volume of exercise, right? Like so. We can see in many other sports. I mean, kids at 10, 11, 12 years old, specifically before puberty, right? There's lots of other sports where kids at that age can train a lot more. I see the question here about, U9, U10. I mean, the reality is that children at that age can handle a lot of exercise, but it has to be periodized. Maybe, I don't know if Marcelo can put the graphic up, and I'll just explain, what I mean, because I say periodization. And so what we're looking at here, okay, this might look complicated, but I'm going to make it really, really simple. It's the acute to chronic workload ratio. This is the ratio between the acute load, which means whatever you do today, okay, and you can calculate it. And by the way, in my courses, which I pushed for 10 years to make mandatory for the coach licensing here in Canada, and nobody ever wanted to work with me on that. So nobody gets this information unless they come and find me, okay? But we teach this, and we teach a way to measure it where you don't even need technology. You can measure the training load. You can measure how hard the players are working today, okay? What this ratio is the ratio between what they do today and the average of what they've done over the last 3 weeks. So if you can imagine for 3 weeks, you did no exercise at all, right? You just went for a walk, nothing. And then today, after 3 weeks of that, you have to go and run for 2 hours on a soccer field. The ratio between what you did today and what you've been doing for the last 3 weeks is way too much. It's too high. Okay? So where do we get into the injury risk or the danger zone with athletes? That's when the ratio is 1.5 or more. What does that mean? That means that today you would have done something which was 50% greater than what you're capable of. That's the problem. If kids are getting hurt more, it's because of this. That's not what overtraining is. If you keep the ratio, you see the green, and I'm moving my mouse. Maybe you can't see my mouse on the screen, but
no. He's sharing the picture.
He's sharing it, right? But you can see the ratio, the green, the sweet spot where the injury risk is low. If what you do today is as low as 20% less than what you're capable of, or up to 30% more, kind of within the range of 10 to 30% more, then you're making small increases in load without going into the danger zone. Now, this is only possible in soccer if you measure it. So you need coaches that understand it, that know how to measure it, that take the time to measure it. It doesn't take long. And as I said, we have a way that we can do it almost free. We actually built an app in my business that lets coaches do this. Okay. Wow. But if you do this, then you can plan week by week, and or in a cycle. Let's say a cycle is 10 days or 2 weeks at a time. You can plan to make these small incremental increases in training load, and then nobody gets hurt. Before puberty, children actually can exercise a lot more than they can after puberty because they're lighter, their bones and joints are much more, pliable and resilient. So what we do, what we do in soccer here is and again, this is all Ontario soccer, just because there's nobody that's competent that knows what they're doing. They tell coaches at U10, U11, or whatever, at those younger ages, no more than 2 practices a week, no more than 3 practices a week, no more. And as the kids get older, they say that's when you can add more training. Stevie, that's backwards.
Yeah.
Before puberty, kids should be exercising 2, 3, 4 hours a day. They should be on the cross-country team. They should be exercising at recess with their friends. They should be exercising with their brothers and sisters and their friends in the neighborhood after school. And they should be playing soccer almost every day. Yep. And when they get older, that's actually when they're bigger, stronger. That's when the risk of injury is higher. So as a matter of fact, we should turn that whole model upside down. And we should say from the age of 6 or 7 up until puberty, for boys, that's about 13. For girls, that's about 11. Okay, 11 and a half. Until puberty, let them exercise a lot, but periodize it.
Yeah.
So don't throw them into games when they're not prepared. Periodize it, and they can get to the point within 6 months to a year where they can handle 3 hours a day of exercise. We know that kids can do this because they do it in other sports. If you have a kid that does gymnastics, and by the way, most of the elite female gymnasts are, pre-puberty or right around that age, they train 5 hours a day, and they don't get hurt. So
yeah, it's different for a lot of sports. I have my daughter in gymnastics, and
there you go.
And it's shown, like they encourage you to come a lot of times. For me, one question that I would have, I'm looking at the soccer at the U9 level. Let's take U9, right? Again, by age group, how would you break it up? Like, let's say micro level 4 to 8, kids 9 to 12, and then teens 13 to 17. How many trainings are appropriate?
Okay, so there's one caveat, which is just that age is one thing, that's chronological age, but there is a way to determine the developmental age of the athletes. And by the way, it's not expensive. All it requires is you have to measure their standing height, their sitting height. So they're on the height where the height of the chair. So they sit down and you measure sitting height, body weight, and you need to know their birthday and how old they are, right? So if you take those measurements, there's a formula, there's an algorithm that you can use to calculate developmental age. Wow. Because not all 9-year-olds are developmentally 9. Not all 12-year-olds are developmentally 12. Typically, and again, I did this in the provincial program before, and I did this in the TFC Academy because I had studied this stuff and I knew how important it was. Most teams, there's a range of developmental age of about 3 years. Meaning, if your kid is under 12, in that team, there are some kids that are developmentally ahead by a year or so. They might be 13 or 14 even, and some are developmentally behind by a year or so. They may be only 11. And they're all together. So the first thing is you need to know developmental age.
Are you going to charge me? Because I'm going to use that.
Take it, man. And if you email me, I'll send you all the stuff. I teach this stuff, but this is it's not expensive, and it shouldn't be. There should be no barriers to this. But again, I can tell you, nobody at Canada Soccer, nobody at Ontario Soccer, not even in the national youth license. Okay, I was brought in for the pilot project for the youth license, and they told me they didn't have time in the course to teach this. So it's not taught. Nobody knows it.
I'm really shocked.
Yeah, trust me, man. It's if you want to know why things are the way they are, you have to start from the top and look down, because that's where the problem is. So in any case, you need to know the developmental age of your athletes. That's first, okay? From there, basically, the basic idea, you don't necessarily need to say that there's a minimum or a maximum number of training sessions. You need to look at load, because load, and again, that graphic that we had, that talks about load. Load is not number of training. Number of training tells you only the time.
Yeah.
The formula to calculate load is time multiplied by intensity. I'll give you an example, okay? You could exercise every day for 3 hours, but you could just walk at 3 miles an hour, let's say, okay? And you know what? Your volume of training is 3 hours a day. It's whatever. It's 20 hours a week, 21 hours a week, right? Okay. But your intensity is very low. And since we multiply volume by intensity to calculate training load, your training load is also going to be very low.
Yeah.
You have no problem with it.
How did you know I walk and I don't run?
No comment. No, just an example, right? So now contrast that to running at, 10 miles an hour on a treadmill for 10 minutes a day. Okay. The volume is way lower, but the intensity is way higher. Your heart rate's going to be maximum, right? So it's it's the product, not the combination, but the product of volume and intensity. That's how you calculate training load. And what we should be doing is we should be giving standards to coaches, and this should be in coach licensing. There's no reason why it isn't there, other than that the people at the top don't know and don't care. Okay. But we should be telling coaches, okay, if your developmental age of your players is between 11 and 12, then the weekly training load should not exceed 3,000 units or whatever. And by the way, I'll just tell you, because I saw someone ask a question about the name of the app. Okay. And I'll tell you I'll tell you the name, but I'll also tell you how it works. The app is called Sports Recovery Tracker. That's one word, sportsrecoverytracker.com. That's the website. It's a web-based app. It costs $1 a month. Okay. So we made it inexpensive.
Yeah.
Now, we know how to calculate volume. Volume is the number of minutes. Okay. That's how many minutes you train for. Intensity, we calculate that by asking players to say how hard their workout was from 0 to 10. So 0 is rest, 10 is maximal. Maybe you've heard this term, RPE, rating of perceived exertion. That's what it is. So if you get from your player, from every player, you get them to tell you at the end of training how hard the workout was from 0 to 10. Let's just say it was a 7. You take that number, you multiply it by the number of minutes. Let's say it was 60 minutes. There you go. You have a number, and that number is the training load. So the standards, and again, this is the way I teach it, the standards have to be based on the weekly training load, not the number of practices. Because you could do 3 practices a week where the coach is just talking the whole time.
Yeah.
And there's no load at all. Or you could do 3 hard, games, and it's totally different. So the time, the number of practices doesn't tell you anything.
So, you know what? It's amazing because, again, everybody knows, and I say it all the time, for Milan Weekly Podcast, it's very rare that I prepare. But when it's someone with a topic as interesting as yours, and we have to let the cat out of the bag. I am one of your speed. I'm your speed disciple. I've retired now, and I'm less fast than I was before. But people know that I'm very fast.
Yeah.
But one of the main things that interests me to meet you and talk to you, because we have never met before today.
That's right.
And I'm pretty sure we will continue to be friends and to talk. Evaluation time for these clubs, right? Everybody talks about evaluations. The parents want to know where their kids stand. The coaches want to know what they have. Wouldn't this be like a fantastic foundation to an evaluation for a child?
100%. Again, it was part of the standards that were put in place. But these standards were put in place, and then nobody ever checked to see whether or not clubs were doing it. And when the data from the test, which by the way the data is garbage, like we just have to say it's completely unreliable because of the fact that it wasn't standardized, right? even though that garbage data was submitted, nobody ever looked at it. So yes, I agree. It would be fantastic to have standardized fitness tests. And it would also be fantastic to have, by the way, if everybody calculated training load in the way that I'm telling you, you could standardize the training load for kids. You wouldn't need to ask me what the best training load is. You could have it for the OPDL. You could have it for the Quebec Provincial High Performance League. You could have BC. You could have it nationwide. And then after 2-3 years, once we have enough data, we can say, okay, this is the physical level of the players. This is how much load they get every week. This is what the games look like. And
Even to
I didn't
start,
invent this. This is done in other countries. I'm just, bringing it here, but nobody works with me here.
yeah, the Canada is very special with that. We like to take only what we think is important, not what is actually important or what seems to be like the sexy important.
I'll go one better, and I'll say that I think that a lot of the people that are in charge of coach development and coach education are okay. They're not competent. They don't have any understanding of sports science at all, and that's because they've only ever been educated here by other people who also had no knowledge. So there was never any foundation of knowledge, and therefore there's never been a transfer of knowledge. And on top of that, the people who are put in charge also don't have experience at the higher levels. So here's what I'll say, okay? If you go anywhere else in the world, and I've been there, okay? You look at the FA and the coach licensing that's done through the FA, you will see the instructors are only people who have coached the national team and professional clubs.
Wow.
I've seen it in Uruguay, I've seen it in Argentina, I've seen it in Europe, and I've seen it even in other CONCACAF countries, including the United States.
Wow.
Canada, as far as I can see, is the only country where the people who teach coach education have no high-level experience at all. No national team, no professional. So what we have is the blind leading the blind. So yes, it would be nice, but we would need to bring in actual experts that have national, international, and professional experience, and they need to be the teachers. When you go to a coach license here in Quebec or in Canada, whatever it is, that what you're getting is it's like somebody that wants to go to law school, and you go to a law school where the teachers have never practiced law. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So
This is really amazing stuff. Again, I thank you so much, Richard. Like, it's really eye opening. It's a topic that we would never have been able to. We have a question there. This has been a great episode. I unfortunately need to leave early. Yeah, thanks. It's okay. Catch the rest when you're on your treadmill, because Richard's
That's right.
putting everybody back on the treadmill. We'll definitely rewatch the episode and check on the website. Thank you for tuning in. Richard, when I said that, because we went through evaluations at the local club, I've seen other evaluations. Just what you just said about development age, that's astonishing. Like that should be core information that everybody needs. And this at the club level, this should be, I say TD, it might not be his job, but he has to be able to put some of this information together to see where his players are growing and how to continue to improve his program, right?
Yeah.
Is it me who's crazy, or
No, man, no. And the truth is, I don't blame, the coaches and the technical directors, because the truth is that they have not been given the resources or the knowledge. As I said, you can't get an A license. I mean, never mind an A license. I mean, in Uruguay, I know that country very well because I live there. You cannot even get the entry level coach license. That's the license that you need to coach. They call it settima. So settima means seventh.
Yes.
That's the under 14. That's the youngest age where they have professional academy teams. That license is 1,400 hours. It is like a college degree, and it takes about a year and a half. Okay. So, and in that license, they have professors from the university that teach exercise physiology, periodization, etc. And to get all the way then to the A license, the highest license, okay, you cannot get it in Uruguay or in any other top, football country without having a basic knowledge and understanding of exercise science. You don't need to be, like me and live and breathe, and you don't need to be an expert, but there's a certain level of expertise that you need. Even in the United States, the C, B, and A licenses have mandatory fitness components. Canada has nothing. So I don't blame the coaches or the technical directors because
Yeah,
they
no,
don't know
I
any
agree.
better.
Yeah,
It has to come from the top. And the truth is, the people at the top are not competent.
wow.
So, in my opinion, we need people. Two things we need. We need people who are in charge of coach development. We need people that have knowledge, and specifically knowledge that they gained somewhere else. Because if you got it here, you got it from other people that don't know. That's one. And two, experience. You should not be teaching in a national license unless you have higher level experience than the people you're teaching. As I said, that's like going to university where you're expecting to get content experts, and instead you're getting someone that coaches in the same club that you do.
Yeah.
Not acceptable.
No, again, great stuff. Amazing. I would like to just put it into perspective for or an example. So we'll go with the CDC and how we're doing training now.
Yeah.
From what I see, again, this is my local club and others that I have friends who share their training sessions with me. How can we fix those training sessions? Is that something that we absolutely need someone like you, or the coaches can figure something out to measure load, to increase the intensity? Because I'll be honest with you, I see some of these drills, Richard,
Yeah.
they're not intense. And people must be thinking, the local soccer show brought on Richard here so that we can bring back people running up mountains and the whole
No.
Rocky training.
No.
You can
Yeah.
be like, and you said intensity. You can be, very intense and have a ball at your foot.
Yeah.
If you
And
could just give us an example of how we
okay.
would be able to fix that.
100%. So, and I want to be clear that, like, so the course that I teach called the Soccer Fitness Trainers course, and again, I taught it for many years through Ontario Soccer until we just couldn't make it work anymore. But in any case, that course was 100% about teaching coaches, not fitness coaches, teaching coaches how they can do everything they need physically on the field with the ball, and not just on the field with the ball, but with their own training. Meaning how to use the regular small-sided games, activities, drills, all of it, but how to pay attention to how much running the players are doing, how long they're working for, how intense they're working for, how to measure load, like we talked about, how to measure it, how to test players to determine whether the training is working. All of it can be done. I don't think it's sustainable for amateur clubs to bring in a fitness coach every day. I don't think they're ever, I know we talked about budget, that's part of it, but
Yeah.
it's also just, logistics and,
Yes.
are there even enough people to do it? Even, again, I know Ontario very well, the OPDL, like every single OPDL team has their games on the same day. And that means they all have to do their fitness training on the same day. And like it's not possible. So
Yeah.
in any case, the only possible person who can administer fitness testing, fitness training, periodization is the coach. So what does that mean? That means the coach needs to be trained. And you're asking, is it possible? 100% it is. That's what I do it. And again, this is knowledge that needs to be taught. And coaches need to be more professional about it because, as I said, everywhere else in the world, the coaches, especially those who are working with the high performance players, it is demanded of them that they know this stuff. They don't need to be an expert, but they need to know enough that they can do a test, that they can plan training, that they can deliver training and monitor the results, and they can track the data. You cannot get an A license anywhere else in the world unless you know that. Canada is the only place.
And I think, because I've done a lot of research myself, President, in the background, with the CDC and how they prepare for it, and what they need to submit to the province. That, at least for Quebec, that's the way it works.
Yeah.
I'm saying TD because that's the person who has the mission statement and what he has to do.
Yeah.
Like, this is something that a club can work with its municipality or its province. We have an expert now. I'm gonna say Richard because Richard's on the show, but again, logistically, like you said, I'm pretty sure you're not the only one in the world that does this.
Nope. Not at
So
all.
there's not an excuse. Now, what's frustrating is why it's not implemented. Obviously, I'm on your side with this because I think it's really important information that can grow with the player.
Right.
We keep stats about stupidity all the time. We might as well keep good stats about someone's health.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and as they grow as a player, because the clubs now, we're seeing with, like a player, example, Kone, who is with the national team. You understand? This is a player that's developed through, multiple clubs. Long story short, CF Montreal, and then he's in the national team, and now he's at Qatar. You understand? Like, that's maybe how many times could that possibly happen?
Yeah.
And you're telling me now that no one had that data on this guy, so it just worked.
This is so the kind of colloquial expression of saying we infer causation from correlation, meaning when a player comes from a club here and gets to the highest level, and I don't know what happened with this club specifically, but
No,
there's
no.
others that came from Ontario that I know very well. So the player comes from the club or whatever, and we assume now that the club must have done everything right because there he is, right? And I get it. Like, of course, I'm sure there's things that were done very well in his coaching and development, for sure. But the only way to really know whether the club environment gave the optimal development to that player is, then we got to, step back a bit and say, okay, well, Canada has, I don't know, like 1 million players registered, right? And we've got 3 professional clubs in the MLS. We have the CPL. We have all these universities. Are we actually developing the right number of top level players? How many players are actually going to professional clubs and signing contracts? What's the value of those contracts? How many players are performing well at the 17, 20 World Cups and Pan Am Games? What's the number of players that are getting starting spots on top leagues in Europe? These are the kind of things. And, I'm not an expert in all this stuff, but believe it or not, I'll tell you what, just this year as an example, I presented at the Congress on Science and Football in Portugal. By the way, I'm the only Canadian that's been to every single one of those since 2007. Nobody from the CSA has ever gone. Nobody from any of the provincial associations. It's only me and my colleagues. We go on our own.
Wow.
So in any case, I want to tell you about Portugal, because
Yeah.
Portugal is one of the top soccer nations in the world. They punch above their weight. Okay, they just won a futsal World Cup. They won a Euro. They're consistently getting to the World Cup. They're doing an excellent job developing players. They're also doing an excellent job with their coaches. They export coaches all over the world.
Their academies, like, Benfica, Porto, produce a lot of talent.
Even the smaller clubs
Even
like Braga
smaller.
and whatever, a lot of them. So Portugal, okay, as good as they are so critical of themselves because they think they can be doing more. They started a partnership between the Portuguese FA and 10 different universities across the country, where the universities are now funded by the government to conduct research on the national team players and teams.
Wow.
So they are trying to optimize player development, and the research is not just in physical training. They're doing psychology, they're doing performance analysis, they're doing nutrition. Okay, they have a team of experts working together to optimize development, and we have what amounts to coincidences.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because a player came from a club doesn't mean that the club did everything to optimize the development of that player. We have no idea what we've done well and what we haven't, because nobody, as I said at the top, we don't even have anybody competent to measure things.
Yeah.
So
Another question. I know this is 50 minutes has flown by, and
no
I know I
problem.
don't want to
I'm
take
here.
too much
No,
of your time. I know you're very
as long
busy.
as you
You're at
need.
the gym. You're gonna probably run on the treadmill for about 4 hours just to get your load up. But we're talking about soccer.
Yeah.
Richard, does this exist in other sports? Like, I would be very surprised that this doesn't exist in hockey. Especially how Canada is so hockey centric.
Yeah. So that's interesting. This is again, be careful that you don't infer causation from correlation. So we have the best hockey teams in the world, right? Okay, but how much of that is due to the fact that we have a hockey culture here? How much of that is due to the fact that we have this history around the game, with these very, very old NHL clubs? I mean, I don't know how old they are, but they're, I think probably coming up on almost 100 years old by now,
Yeah.
right? So obviously it's Canada is a winter country, and we have ice, we have these, we still have pickup hockey, we have all this stuff, right? So the truth is that if we look at like I'm talking about sports science, that's what I know, right? Okay, I know sports science and I know coaching. Okay, Canada is not conducting or publishing any really noteworthy research in sports science in hockey either.
Wow.
So we're not like leaders on the science and technology front in that sport either.
Is
I
there
don't,
is there any sport that we actually measure?
not really. Like we
Lacrosse,
no. Like the thing
bowling,
is
something.
honestly, listen. One day, maybe if you travel, go to the United States, go to Australia. Maybe not now, but at some point, go to China. What you see in countries like that is that those countries want to be the best at everything. And if they don't produce good athletes Australia is a good example to me. They have. I talked about Portugal, and places like that. It's not acceptable to these countries that they don't, develop top athletes, and they've recognized that part of the way that they develop top athletes is by connecting to universities and optimizing the sports science part of it. Canada is not doing it
Okay.
in any
If we
sport.
go if we
We're
go
not
to
doing
our
it.
neighbor to the south, the states,
Yeah.
are they better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and obviously it's a much bigger country.
Yes.
There's much more money. It's different, right? Like
Yeah.
we can't be
It's a different
unrealistic about
animal.
things, but you know, are they better? Yes. They have a much different infrastructure around coach education, sports science, research that is done with the top level national team programs and even individual sport programs. Part of it is money, but it's not just money. And Canada has money.
Yeah.
we're not a
They
a
do, they
country
do.
that's not wealthy. Yeah.
And when
So
we saw it with the Olympics, and it's a couple of times I bring it, and it's very frustrating to me. Like I see a lot of increased price in signups for kids for soccer, especially
yeah,
at the competitive level.
yeah,
We're now Team Canada has made the Qatar. When we had the Olympics, they went crazy with the podium program, right? They did everything and anything possible because we were hosting the Olympics in our backyard to make sure that we end up on the podium. Why do they put so much emphasis only when it's like really, really needed instead of looking and reaching out to people like you
yeah,
and having a sustained program where they can do it for a longer period of time, and not only for I'm not only talking about soccer.
yeah,
I'm
right, yeah,
shocked that we don't produce any reports on how to build a player, because if I think about it as a caveman, if I would really want to invent a hockey player,
yeah.
like, I'm coming to Canada.
You
I
got the
want to
raw
know what the
materials
guy
here.
eats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I want him to
yeah,
come out of Regina. I
yeah,
want him to play in the Western Hockey League. I want his name to be Kyle, and I want him to destroy people. Like,
yeah,
if I'm
yeah,
and I'm shocked that we don't even produce these metrics that you're talking about with the sport that we love. So let alone soccer, which is a secondary or third choice sport.
yeah.
It shocks me, right? So
I got, honestly, I don't have all the answers. Like the one thing I would say is I know there's definitely been a big shift here in Canada with, I go back to coach education because to me, this is like the real missing piece, is there's been a shift. Like, I think we all could probably have agreed, I think you and I are close in age, and, the coaching that we would have got in the 1980s and 90s, it was somebody's father.
yes,
There was probably a lot of yelling and screaming. There was probably a lot of inappropriate things being said, and
or
all
just
of it,
out
right?
of
So,
experience.
right. So, anyway, we can agree that wasn't ideal. But instead of sort of finding a happy medium where the training can still be demanding, where there's still, discipline and players are pushed and all of that, we've gone way too far to the other side where like all I'm seeing when I see a good example, okay, there's a soccer summit coming up in Ontario next year. And I don't know. I see a lot of topics around safe sport, and kind of the compliance and the administrative, and so it's all about making players feel comfortable and included. And like,
The
I get it.
snowflake thing.
I don't like, as I said, there's an extreme and there's things that are not optimal, but there's a happy medium. And instead of finding that happy medium, we seem to focus so much on, again, like, there's no standards. I mean, why are we not keeping scores in these young age groups? Why are there no standings? Why have we gone away from, I don't know, tournaments that give,
Medals.
why? Like, it's like, you don't need, like, you can have competition. If you have coaches that know what they're doing, you can have very, very competitive youth leagues and tournaments, and nobody gets discouraged. Nobody drops out. It doesn't happen. And you know how I know that is because it happens in many other countries.
Exactly.
We lie to coaches here when we tell them that everywhere else in the world they don't care about winning. That's not true. I've been there. I can tell you right now, okay? The top clubs in Uruguay, if the youth teams are not winning, the coaches are not going to stay there. They want to develop and they want to win at the same time. I talked just recently to somebody from Benfica. As I said, I was there, in Portugal in the summer. Okay, he said flat out, he said, you cannot develop without winning, because if you have talented young players that come up in a youth system where they are told it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, when they get to the highest level, they don't compete. But somehow we've got this thing in our heads. As I said, I think we need a happy medium. We need to be more demanding.
Yeah. Look,
We need standards.
I go to bat for you on this because I talk to everybody that comes on this show. I'm not a seventh place father or a participation father. You're seventh place. I'm gonna let you know that you're a seventh place. And you know what? We'll try to take some positive out. I'm not a caveman. I'm not an animal.
Yeah.
We'll take some positives at it. But I need to show my son or my daughter that the world works like this. You win and you lose. And I'm a big believer, when I talk to my friends about soccer, and I'm a very proud Milan fan, and they talk to me about Roma, they talk to me about Naples, teams that are, they have won but very little. I teach. My response to them is that these teams need to know how to lose sometimes to learn how to win, because it's really hard to lose. But in life, you don't get a medal for seventh place. You get fired. You get fired.
Right.
And again, that's my argument to exactly those same
It's
people who
yeah.
say, we don't need standings, we don't need
And
we don't want to keep statistics. I said, but guys, the world keeps statistics. People
and
know how many projects I deliver.
right, and it's a misconception that we make this assumption that it's automatic. If a kid is on a team that's losing all the time, that kid is going to hate soccer and drop out. No, if that's the case, that's because there's no leadership in place that is coaching this kid properly and putting this into perspective and
Yeah.
saying, hey, look, yeah, okay, you lost, and we can look at some of the things. Maybe you made some mistakes. Maybe the developmental age of the team you played against is a year ahead of you, and there's nothing you can do. Maybe you did your best, and these are the things that you really did well, and let's focus on those. Fine. But we cannot just eliminate standards and expect to develop talent. And that's why I'm saying I question when we start saying this player was developed here, and I don't infer causation from correlation.
No,
I don't
no.
I don't
I'm gonna
agree.
remember that. That's a good
Yeah,
saying that I never heard before.
yeah.
Richard, we're an hour in. It flew by. I will have you on again. We're gonna pick other
Great. Yeah,
topics
let's
that
do
we're
it.
gonna
Yeah,
pick your brain about.
sure.
I have your email now, so you're
Of
gonna
course.
get some questions from me.
Yeah,
Uh, I like to do this with all my guests. I wanna make sure that we end off on a happy note. Where
right.
this is great information. Just quick fire questions before I let you tell people where they can find you, where they can find your business, if they're in the Toronto region, when you're gonna open up your Montreal
Oh,
chapter, and so on and
right.
so forth.
Right.
But quick fire questions that just to pick your brain and get some laughs out of it.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
for me, I thought it's not the top question comes at the end, but I think you answered it. But you're a soccer guy. You watch Serie A. Who's your favorite team?
It's AC Milan. Always has
AC.
been, and I'm
AC
very
Milan.
optimistic about this year. So
Nice.
I
And your
think we're
favorite player, not
of all
present
time.
and in the past. Present in the
Oh
past.
wow. Okay. So I mean, in the past, it was. I have Paolo Maldini and Gennaro Gattuso, and
Nice.
Maldini was. I wanted to be like him, but I wasn't like him. I was probably a little more like Gattuso, so
Yeah.
even though I wasn't. But he was my guy. Right now, who do I like the best right now? I mean, I like Sadio Mane.
Yeah. Sadio Mane from Liverpool.
Yeah,
No, now he's at Bayern Munich.
yeah. Not because as I said, I was more of a defensive midfielder type and whatever, but just I like everything about him. I mean, he's athletic, he's skilled, he's a hard worker. Yeah. I really like him. Yeah.
You have any other team other than Milan that you follow?
In England, I've always liked Liverpool, and part of that is because I presented at one of those science and football conferences there, and we got to tour the city and the stadium, which is like
Wow.
any football fan should go there because Anfield is really like a really impressive place, and they have that kind of like that from the city, like that really humble kind of, it's like it was an industrial town,
Yeah.
and so they're not as flashy. Like Anfield is beautiful, but it doesn't look like Old Trafford or, and they try to instill that into the players, and I saw that and I liked it. So I like Liverpool.
Nice.
Yeah.
And for people to get to know you, did you have a mentor that pushed you in this direction, or someone who influenced you to go into the sports science?
Yeah, so there's a couple that I'll name. So one of them is my coach at university, who I also coached with at York University. His name is Paul James, and I know he's had a bit of a rough time lately and all that. But he was a huge influence on me. He coached me in my last year at York. I was a captain under him, and really he influenced me a lot. Paolo Paccione. I don't know if you know that name, but
No.
no. So he was the fitness coach at Montreal with the
Oh,
Impact.
okay.
He's one of my best friends, and he actually was working as a fitness coach even before me. I mean, I started kind of young, but he was doing it at the highest level before me, my age. So he started when he was like 20 years old, and he worked with the
Well,
Toronto
we got to
Lynx.
get Paulo on. I
You
had the
absolutely
Toronto
should.
guy before the
Paul,
Montreal guy.
Paolo now, okay, is actually the director of performance with Club America in Mexico. So this is the
Oh,
biggest club in North
yeah.
America, and he's had a fantastic career. He still is a mentor to me. I mean, we talked just last month, and he's a big one. And then I'd have to just say as well, and unfortunately he's no longer with us now. But Gary Miller, I don't know if you know that name. So Gary was the technical director at Ontario Soccer, and
Okay.
way back when Gary was a coach of mine in the Ontario provincial program, and he had an academy called Bryce,
Okay.
which he helped me try to get, he connected me with some universities. I ended up going to York, but he was kind of like the first real good, knowledgeable coach that I had, Gary Miller. Unfortunately, as I said, he passed away in 2020, and
Wow.
rest in peace to him. But yeah, those are the three. So
Amazing. Amazing. Richard, now you're all about fitness and health, but I'm pretty sure you eat. So
oh yeah,
if I
a
tell
lot.
you pizza or pasta, what do you pick?
I love pizza, but honestly, a good pasta with a pesto sauce to me, a homemade pesto,
Okay,
you
okay. So
can't beat
this
it,
is
man. Yeah,
perfect.
so
This is
yeah, so
perfect because it leads me to my most important question for my guests.
yeah,
This pesto, Richard, you get home, you ran 700 miles on your treadmill, super fast treadmill. Someone punches you in the stomach and they get hurt, but you need to eat. You're
yeah,
eating this plate of pasta.
right.
We're selecting penne. Are they penne lisce or penne rigate?
I like rigate.
Rigate.
I do.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
yeah.
that's it.
But it's all about the sauce, and
Yeah.
I got to be honest, I'm not a good cook, but my wife, I married an Italian. My
Okay.
wife is an excellent cook, and she makes, to me, restaurant quality pesto, and that's it's
Shout out
fantastic.
to
Yeah,
Richard's wife,
Christina,
Stevie
Christina.
P,
Yeah.
Christina, get ready because if I'm coming to Toronto and this guy's gonna make me run on the treadmill, I'm
Hundred
coming
percent,
anytime.
100%. Yeah.
Richard, I want to thank you so much, Presidente and the Master Control. I want to thank you so much. I'm going to thank also again Evangelista Sports guys. The World Cup is here. Go get your stuff. You want something, go buy it. The guys at guys and girls at Evangelista Sport are gonna hook you up online at their store in beautiful Montreal. Richard, if you're ever in Montreal, you contact me and Presidente, and we will surely meet up and have a nice little bite to eat. I would say we would train, but by my
No,
size, I'm not in the training. I'm not in the training game yet. Maybe you can convince me otherwise, but Richard, thank you very much. Before we go, please let people know how they can, either reach you or inquire about your stuff. If we're sharing this, other clubs, guys, I will try to bring this up
mm,
at my club. I'm pretty
mm,
sure Marcello will do the same at his. But if you're sharing this, Richard is the guy that you need for this sports fitness stuff. Pick his brain and tell us how they can reach you, Richard.
sure, great. So, I mean, as I said, Soccer Fitness was my first company. We rebranded to Speed Training, but there's two websites. One of them, they're easy to remember. One of them is soccerfitness.ca, all one word. So soccerfitness.ca. The other is speedtraining.ca. Okay, and both of those, there are emails, which would be richard at soccerfitness.ca and richard at speedtraining.ca. So the websites will have all the information, including, the coach education stuff that I'm doing, the training, the research. It's all there. All the articles I've published, they're all there. And I'm happy. Honestly, anyone who emails me about anything, I always respond. If it's advice, if it's I know somebody asked about the app, and I saw you guys put the URL up there.
Yeah.
If there's a way that I can direct you, I mean, I've got a YouTube channel, I've got a lot of free stuff, right? So if somebody wants information and I can direct you to the free content, I'll do it. If you
Nice.
want to set up a coaching course out there or online, I'm happy to do. It's my business, right? So
Yeah.
I'll anyone who messages me, I will reply. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Richard, once again, thank you very much. Again, stay on because we're gonna pick your brain after the camera goes off. And guys, please share this with your club, share this with your association, your region. Guys, if you're from Canada Soccer, get this material up to Canada Soccer because Richard knows what he's talking about. And let's get some stats on these kids so that we can produce more, and we can develop properly. Guys, I want to thank you. I'm Stevie P. Marcello's in Master Control. Richard's in Toronto. Buonasera and Forza Milan and the local soccer show.